Wedding season is always a lucrative time of year for me. I work for some fancy reception hall that hosts weddings pretty much every Friday and Saturday from May until October. Some events are fun and others are horrible. Since the company is small and family-owned, they try and do everything themselves. When it was becoming too much, they hired me. I'm basically a glorified handyman. I help set up the weddings, help assist with wiring, and most importantly, I'm the guy who stays late and cleans everything up, especially on Friday nights since Saturday another wedding will be taking place right after. I always like weddings that are small and quiet because then I'm not spending hours cleaning up the place since those folks tend to be a bit more reserved. But in the story I'm about to tell you, it was the exact opposite. It was a gigantic wedding. Hundreds of people were there and we were at max capacity. As the night progressed, I could see the people getting more and more drunk and rambunctious. I was trying to clean and pick up in the background while everyone was dancing and having a good time, but there was only so much cleanup work that I can do with a building full of people. I decided to take a long break and just rest my eyes for a bit while the wedding was still going on. I woke up 45 minutes later and then I noticed the time. The wedding would end in about 20 minutes or so and I could get going on my cleanup work. I grabbed my headphones and made my way from the parking lot to the building. As I made the long walk up the hill, I was disgusted right away. Outside, it looked like a music festival had just come through. There was trash and empty bottles everywhere. I even saw a girl lying on the grass, snoring. I went inside and the band was still playing and the inside was just as bad as the outside. Tables and chairs had been flipped over, bottles and cans were everywhere, and even plates and napkins were just littered all over the floor. I was kinda angry. My bosses, the couple that owned the place, came up to me before the end of the wedding and apologized and told me that if I did a good job tonight, they would pay me extra, and I could take next Friday off. Now I was mad, but it seemed like a fair trade-off. It took forever, but they finally started to empty out the place. Thankfully, they hired a bus to transport them wherever they were going because these people were in no position to drive. They only had 2 small party buses, so they would have to make 2 trips to pick up everyone. I was trying to pick up the tables and chairs, but because some people were still left behind waiting, they were throwing things and just being inconsiderate people. An hour and a half after the official ending time of the wedding, everyone was finally gone, and my bosses went home for the evening. And this is the time of the night that I don't mind. Being alone, with my headphones working, is peaceful for me, and since I knew that I was going to be there a long time picking up after this party, I needed this peaceful time to just kinda wind down. I started outside and went from side to side, picking up trash and fixing all the patio furniture. That took a while, and then I went inside and started on the inside. It started to get cold outside, so I shut the door and continued my work. A while later, my wireless headphones died, and I figured that I would just use the speaker from my phone since nobody was around anyway. When I placed the phone on one of the tables, I noticed something strange. The door to the venue was wide open, and I distinctly remember shutting it. I went over and shouted into the air to see if anyone was there, and of course, I heard nothing back. It was kind of windy out, so I didn't think that it was that outlandish of an idea that maybe the wind had knocked it open since I didn't lock it. It had never happened before, but it doesn't mean it was impossible. I made some trips back and forth from the main hall to the kitchen. I was just about done for the night, and I noticed that the door was open again. Now I felt uncomfortable and figured maybe the owner was around and I was just being stupid and didn't realize it. I called out the owner's name several times, but I heard nothing back. I'm not an easily spooked guy, so my rational brain was telling me that everything was fine, and I just need to finish up, lock the door, and just be out. So that's exactly what I did. Once I finished, I locked the door and started walking to my car. When it was only about 30 or 40 feet away from the building, I saw the reflection of the light shine off the glass. I stopped on a dime because I knew I had turned the lights off. I turned around and saw the lights were shining brightly through the windows. I ran back, unlocked the door, and standing in the middle of the room was a man. He had suit pants on and a white buttoned-up shirt with his tie loosened. Strangely, he wasn't wearing any shoes or socks, though. I could clearly see right away that this guy just wasn't right. His eyes appeared to be half open, and even though he wasn't moving, he was sort of swaying back and forth. I asked if he was okay, and in a mumbling but angry-sounding voice he said, "Where's my jacket? I want my jacket." Clearly, this man had too much to drink and seemed to be left behind. I tried to be civil and tell the guy to just relax and I'll help him out. I put my head down for a second to call the owner, and at that moment that I had my head down, I heard his bare feet running hard on the ground. I looked up, and he was running in the opposite direction of where I was standing. He ran into the kitchen, still screaming about his jacket. I called the owner and told him what was happening, and he said that he would be right down since he only lived about 100 yards away. And while I was talking to the owner on the phone, I described this man so the owner could try and contact someone from the wedding. He called the best man since we had his contact information as well as the bride and groom, and thankfully he was still awake. My boss told him about the guy and described his appearance. The best man said he didn't recognize the description of the person at the wedding, but since there were so many people, he said it might be possible that he was still there, left behind. While I was waiting for my boss to come back to the venue, I decided to go into the kitchen and try to communicate with this guy. I turned the lights on, and I heard the scampering of the bare feet again on the ground. I turned in the direction of the noise, and lunging at me with a steak knife was the man. In that brief moment, I was able to block that swing and just crawl out of the kitchen and slam the door. This all happened in, I would say, only a matter of seconds. My heart was racing, and this man began to beat on the door, and all I could do was just sit there and try and hold it shut. At that moment, my boss walked in, and I immediately screamed for him and begged to call the police, as I was stuttering my way through what was happening as I held the door shut. The man in the kitchen was screaming, beating the door, scraping the knife against it. He wasn't saying anything really of substance other than an occasional mention of his jacket. Thank Christ, the police finally showed up and apprehended this man who seemed confused as to why he was being arrested. And the wedding party was contacted the next day, and to our horror, apparently, they didn't recognize this guy. He wasn't at the wedding. When they had finally got the pictures developed and scoured through every photo, they didn't find any pictures of this man except for one photo. One picture toward the end of the night showed a group of guys and girls smoking cigars around a small bonfire outside, and in the background, you can see the guy walking up the hill toward the venue. It was blurry, but it was very clearly that guy. We still have no idea where this man came from and what his ultimate intentions were. And from what I was told by my boss, he may have been some crazy person, but that's all we know, or maybe even just some drunk who was trying to crash a wedding for some free booze. But ever since that night, I don't wear my headphones so I can hear my surroundings, and I always lock the door every time I go in and out. If you enjoyed this scary story, listen to thousands more, either over on the Let's Read YouTube channel or podcast.